I'm Matt Carpenter.
And I'm Peg Keogh.
Welcome to the College Podcast. We are going to be your ultimate guides in helping you figure out how to navigate this maze in such a way that you don't lose your minds or your wallets. Let's get started. Hi, Peg.
Hey Matt, how you doing? I really love your swanky microphone you got since last week. It's
We're
very
getting
lovely.
fancy, buddy. We're getting
I'm
fancy.
feeling I have one, but it's in a box. I guess I better get it out.
We're upping our production game thanks to my producers Eileen and Jera. So more to come. You're next there, pal. I outed you last week. I shared some of your personal information with the masses, with the world here. Do you want to get me back? Anything that you care to?
No, I'm all good.
Okay.
Life is crazy, but yeah, and I apologize that I'm kind of a little bit framed weird today. If you're watching, if you're not, it doesn't matter.
As long as we can see you,
hear my melodious voice.
If we can see you, we're okay. Okay, so what I'm going to do, obviously, we have a ton to talk about here, so we'll keep the pleasantries to a minimum today. I'm going to rip through the table of contents, and then we'll kind of pick off each one of these individually. Obviously, we're going to be talking about this for the foreseeable future, probably years to come in different ways, but just kind of these threats and some actual actions that have happened with these changes going on with Doge, this Dear Colleague letter, these kind of sweeping, recommendations. That's probably too nice of a word with DEI initiatives and the impact of federal funding. So certainly we will, double click on that. We're already seeing some meaningful impacts in terms of federal loans, specifically some different types of repayment plans, forgiveness programs. Again, we'll hit on those specifically. And again, as we see some writing on the wall here for some other federal loans to be impacted, the federal direct student loan, and then the parent program called the PLUS loan. I would argue that for me personally, and I think you feel the same way, Peg, that one of the things we're most concerned about, a newish headline, is that Pell Grants could be impacted.
That's huge.
Moving forward, exactly. And that was something that I did not have on my bingo card at all. As a matter of fact, I sure hope I don't have to eat crow there, but I'm less confident than I was even a week ago. And then lastly, we'll spend a minute on the fact that the Federal Student Aid Program, the FSA, has reduced staff by 10%, which is meaningful. And we're already seeing some things there. But before we kind of get into each one of these, Peggy, just give us, if I'm a parent, if I'm a student, I'm in college, I'm getting ready to go to college. I mean, what should my mindset be right now with these new headlines every day?
Yeah. So, people that know me, it's all about mindset and controlling just how you think about things. All of us are waking up every morning and it's new information, and a lot of it is not super pleasing. If you're a parent with high school kids, if you're a parent with kids in college, if you're in college and you've got certain packages, or you're a high school kid who's trying to figure out how you're going to make this affordable within your family. Let's just say it. It sucks. It's hard, right? What we're seeing, and if you haven't seen this trend, we'll talk about it a little bit, that there's a lot being thrown at the wall, right? And not all of it is going to stick. And we're going to talk about a couple of those today that have been thrown at the wall, sounded awful. And we have a judicial system. So judges are weighing in on this. People are filing lawsuits. So try not to, what I call, catastrophize, because some of these things may not come to fruition. We talk about the Pell. That's one. And Matt and I will weigh in. We'll say, yeah, this is one not to catastrophize, but just to realize this could be more of a reality than some of the other things. So that's what I would say, is just try not to catastrophize in your life in general, but with this for sure, because it's easy to just be completely anxiety ridden when you keep hearing all this news. And also some of the news, it's not even real news, right? It might just be on some social media that's not even accurate. So you got to always be careful of that as well. But just a lot of deep breaths. And maybe look out the window and see that beautiful little bird and say, you know what? Life's okay. Or look at your child who's laughing, eating breakfast, and say, life is okay. So.
Yeah, and I have a similar, we share pretty, I think, similar philosophy. And I heard something I really liked yesterday. I was listening to a podcast, and it's kind of similar thing. These external things are happening. What can we do about it? And this guy, I should maybe we can send it in the footnotes because he deserves the credit. He said, think about what could go right. And I really like that because we have such a tendency to do, oh my God, everything's going to go wrong and this could happen and this could happen. And the fact of the matter is, things rarely, the worst case scenario rarely comes to fruition. And maybe the best case scenario, right, rarely comes to fruition. So I really like let's think about what could go right. And things could go right here, guys, right? We have to remember this system was not working for most people, right? Most Americans sending their kids to college, going to college themselves, it wasn't working. So for some things to change, that could very well be positive. And I just kind of like that as a general mindset. And some of those things could be, and I think, like you're saying, Peg, it's going to force us, I hope, to take some agency, take some accountability, and say, nobody's coming to our rescue. We, as consumers, are going to be responsible for the outcome here, right? And I think that could be a great thing. And we'll talk about the math here, but this could ultimately drive prices down, the prices of college specifically, some of these things potentially. So it's not all doom and gloom, is I think what both of us
And it's
are trying to say.
always been the case that you as students and parents have some control in this. You just have to understand about financial aid and where you fit and take control, right?
Right.
You have choices. We're lucky in this country. There's thousands of schools and they all do things differently when it comes to discounting the cost of college. And we've said this before, but the biggest thing is these colleges are not going to stop discounting their costs. And if you're hearing that going, what the hell are you talking about, Peg? Discounting? Tune in with us because the sticker price, the cost of attendance is irrelevant, right? And that's going to continue. These colleges are going to figure out how they do it and be in compliance if certain laws come in. And you just have to get that. You have to understand where you fit. That's always been the case with taking out too many loans. I mean, you are in the driver's seat if you choose to be.
Yep.
In my opinion.
Agreed. Okay, so kind of first thing here, and this is somewhat meta, but just any commentary from your side around just kind of these Doge threats or initiatives in general, right, as it pertains to our space. So that would, in my mind, include the Dear Colleague letter, which has a more comprehensive interpretation of the, what we talked about last week, the Supreme Court versus Harvard from 2000, potentially. These colleges could lose federal funding if they're using any of it towards DEI, basically, is probably the long and short of that Dear Colleague letter. And again, that's kind of been one initiative as we're talking about Doge, taking a closer look at the Department of Education here. But anything that you would add or since, I guess, last week?
Well, the main piece with that is that a Judge Abelson, I think, was the person's name, basically said this is arbitrary and discriminatory. And so now there's a hold on that. So at the meta level, if we're seeing the trends here, and Bannon actually said this on an interview way before Trump was elected, hey, we are just going to throw stuff. There is just going to be stuff coming every day. And he didn't say this, but what he meant was, yeah, some of it'll stick and some of it won't. And it's just going to be a bit chaotic. I mean, he basically said it. So, and that's what I see happening. And that's why before when I said try not to catastrophize, because there's so many things to catastrophize. And if we look at it and you take a deep breath, like this is a perfect example. This was a big deal. We talked about it, the Dear Colleague letter. Oh my gosh, all these colleges. Now there's a hold. Because again, we have a judicial system. So I think in general, keep that in mind. And I would guess behind closed doors with the Trump administration, they know this is going to happen. They know they're going to throw stuff out there. I mean, the whole legality of Doge, seeing any information. Now the courts have stepped back and said, no, you can't get in there and see family social security, people's social security numbers and date of birth and bank account information. No, you can't do that. So there's been a hold on some of these things. And I think that trend is going to continue. Is it unnerving that people that aren't elected are doing this? Yeah, it's unnerving, I would think, for most Americans. We can't do anything about that as an individual. So, I mean, you can call your senators and your congressmen, but just in general, and that's a perfect example. The thing last week, not that it's gone and we shouldn't talk about it, but it's been capped, at least temporarily, by a judge.
Yeah. And I got to come up with some original material, Peg, but I heard something else that I like as it pertains to this. And this one I can give the credit. So this this really impressive economist. Her name's Kyla Scanlon. She's a Gen Z gal. I think she's like only 25 years old or something like this. And she came up, or I believe, came up with the term FAFO, which is to describe this, which is fuck around and find out. That's the philosophy of kind of Doge and this administration in general. Of like, we're just going to unplug all these things and kind of see what happens. And then maybe figure out, okay, which ones are we actually, in fact, going to be allowed to unplug? What's going to break something so much so that we need to plug it back in, right? Just kind of like this, tech bro mentality, go fast and break things. And that's kind of the, again, overall philosophy, right? Which I don't hate all of it. Again, I've said it once, I'll say it again. I just wish the messaging was a little bit kind of nicer, right? I think everybody could receive changes easier if it came with a tone that says, hey, look, we think college should be more accessible and affordable for more people in this country. And we want to hit the pause button, take a close look and see where we can do better, right? Like, who can disagree with that, assuming that's ultimately their goal, which will hold out.
Well, their goal is to save money so they can continue the tax cuts. That's their goal. I would tell every American, look at those tax cuts and look and see if it helps you or not. It might help you to have those not sunset at the end of this year, but that's their goal, is to find money. But I 100% agree. The messaging could be way better. I don't see that changing. It's a bull in a china shop. I don't see the messaging changing. And it's hard. That makes it even harder when the messaging is crummy.
Yeah, right. And that's why you got to almost like make your own filter for these things, right? And say like, all right, let me kind of receive it in a way that I can maybe get behind the intentions here, or at least some of them, or try to see it from their point of view, if it's not something that you immediately agree with. And you're like this gal, Kyla Scanlon, Peggy, because listen to this. So I said, I listened to her, I was like, wow, really impressed. Now I've heard her a few times. I'm like, what fancy college did she go to? Let me look her up here. Western Kentucky. And that's a compliment to Western Kentucky, and that's a compliment to Kyla. And I'm kind of calling myself out here, Peggy, of being like a snob.
I was just going to call you in. I'm like, shame on you, dude.
100%.
You don't have to go to fancy colleges to change the world. There's so many examples of that.
You know who says that? People that went to fancy colleges, Peg. That's who. People that graduated from Cornell get to say that. But from those of us that did not, that are insecure about their own fancy colleges, we're still working through that. Okay, but Kyla's inspiration.
Another podcast.
It's another podcast, and that'll be a good one, no doubt about it. Okay, so the next piece here is some of the impacts that we're already seeing that are not getting headlines that we think they probably should, right? And that's kind of a theme that's got me a little bit nerved up that I'll probably talk about. But there's some things that are already happening here with some of the current federal loans, the SAVE loan, the IDR repayment plan, some of the loan forgiveness programs. Just shed some light on some of those things, Peggy, and let's get out.
Some of the latest news on that is the online application for the income-driven repayment. So that means, for people unfamiliar, you're going to pay back your loans based on what you make. That application, which is tied into loan forgiveness, the app is down. The administration took the app down. So that's a little disconcerting. It's a little scary. Also, the federal direct loan consolidation, which can be hugely impactful from, making good choices when you get into repayment. Sometimes consolidation can be huge depending on your different interest rates. That's down as well. And that's brand new information. The other piece that you mentioned, the SAVE program, that's something that the Biden administration put in. They put a pause on that a couple weeks ago. And that's all tied into repaying based on what you're making. It's to help consumers. I think a lot of this, it's scary. And if you're in this with the intention of using these, you got to do your best to navigate it. But people that aren't in this world yet, you've got high school kids, sit back and notice this, right? Loans are not terrible, but reasonable amount of loans that we don't have a crystal ball. You don't know what your child's really going to end up graduating with a degree. They might be comp sci and say, oh my gosh, I can't do this. I change majors. Like, people change majors, but try to be unemotional when you're looking at this and be realistic. So you're not you could tell stories, and so could I, Matt, of these families where I get off my calls and I'm nervous for them. They're not nervous and I'm nervous for them. because they're making decisions, even they know because I'm telling them. And I know I'm ranting now, but all these programs exist because people tend to get into situations when they're in hot water, right? So try to not even be in there. If you're in there now, it's all good, but these things it could escalate, and without, you're going on there to try and apply and it's shut down.
Yeah, I mean, look, this one has got me. I have yet to find the silver lining in this right now. I'll tell you, because I know plenty of families that I've worked with over the years. They usually, I'm generalizing here, I'm oversimplifying, but for most families that use the PLUS loan, which is a federal loan for parents that need to borrow to send their kids to college, or if it's a graduate student sending themselves to get a graduate degree, MBA or law school, right? You use this PLUS loan. Usually, the main reasons where it will make sense for families is, number one, if you don't have very good credit, this might be your only choice to borrow. Okay. Number two, historically, it is the loan with the most flexible repayment terms, right? So what Peg's talking about, this SAVE program, the income-based repayment plan. Said another way, you can have it's the best way to manage your monthly cash flow, right? Now, we're talking about 25-year repayment terms, so the gross amount you're going to pay back on that loan is going to be massive. But for a lot of families, their biggest concern is like monthly cash flow. How can I borrow an amount to send my kid to college and have these really flexible repayment terms when I graduate? Or maybe I'm a public servant, I'm a police officer, I'm a firefighter, so I can have some forgiveness options, right? I know a lot of people that took this loan because of those features, and it made sense for them, and I signed off on it, right, with them. And now this feels like, I don't know how you could say the rug is not getting pulled out here if they change some of these. And I don't know how they can defend not grandfathering in.
Yeah, I don't either. Neither one of us are lawyers, but I don't get how legally somebody does something with the intention, and there's a program in place
A
that
contract,
let
right?
them
There's a contract.
continue, but if you want to discontinue it for
Right.
newbies.
Exactly.
I don't see how you do that to
Me
somebody.
neither, because I 100%, right? And I'm looking at these families right now that are going, well, hey, look, we've been able to make this happen because our monthly payments are $200. If this plan goes away, it could be $1,100, and that's
Right. Then
it's
they're
not manageable, right? So I mean, more to come there. And again, they're hitting a pause button at the moment, so it's just kind of sit and wait, and let's hope they do the right thing. And again, the folks that are already in that plan, they're grandfathered into it, and they just don't allow it to new borrowers. We can live with that, right?
right.
Okay.
Exactly.
Related, right? We talked about, I just mentioned the PLUS loan. We anticipate some changes coming with that, as well as potentially the federal direct student loan. You want to talk about first the federal direct student loan, Peg, and some of the potential changes, and maybe the PLUS loan as well?
Yeah, well, so the federal direct student loan, that's truly, in my mind, the only thing that is a student loan, because there's no cosigner. Your child gets it. All they do is submit the FAFSA successfully, good to go, right? It's great for many reasons for the student. There's two versions of it. So this has been the government for years encouraging further education. There's a subsidized version. So if you have need-based eligibility, the government pays the interest till 6 months after graduation. I tell all families, this is a no-brainer. Just take it. Take the float. Even if you can pay, you got money in the market, let it grow, right? That's been a no-brainer. And then there's an unsubsidized version that every student can get, or some students only get the unsubsidized version because there's no need-based eligibility. Like, Bill Gates's kids, right? There's a chance. I mean, when this all hit the fan, I'm like, in my mind, I thought subsidized loans are going to go away. It's in my gut. I haven't even read tons about it. But just watching the mindset of the current administration, I think that'll probably go away. I'm hoping that the subsidized loans in general, the unsub doesn't go away, because it's, for most families, usually the best place to start, as you know, Matt, right? So I'm hoping, and it's a manageable amount. It's $27,000 over 4 years. So as I always say, my daughter, the social worker who graduated, if she had that much debt, even at a low paying job, she could have afforded to pay it back. You're not, living in the basement with your mom still doing your laundry kind of thing to pay your loan. So, but I have a feeling, but again, that's just my gut, that piece, but we got to see how that plays out. Fingers crossed that still exists in some way. The PLUS loan, I mean, we talked about this last time, and I'm a good listener. So I listened to your thoughts, Matt. And so I'm not saying the plus loan is terrible across the board. There are some times where it's useful, but it could go away as well. And then we're into the private market and we're into the state loan market. And then who knows what'll happen there? Will there be collusion, or will there actually be, like macroeconomics says there's perfect competition, which to me is total BS. But will there be competition and that's better for the consumer, or will there be some collusion because now they got them? There's no other games in town. I mean, that all remains to be seen. But right now, like, that's just, I think it's helpful for you to understand those two types of loans, but don't obsess about it. We will talk about it if we're seeing clearly that certain things are going to be on the chopping block. But those are the two federal loan programs, and I'm sure they're in their purview, in the administration's purview of like, what are we doing with this?
Yeah, a couple things to add here. I mean, number one, we recommend, Peg said it right, but we recommend pretty much universally that everybody take advantage of that federal direct student loan, $27,000 total over the course of 4 years. And in some cases, even if a family doesn't need it, right? And the added benefit there is that they can take out that loan, pay it off right away, and then the kid graduates with established credit, right? Because like you said, nobody requires they don't require a cosigner. This is technically just in the student's name, regardless of who ultimately pays it back. Now, if they get rid of the subsidized loan, I can live with that, right? And I can somewhat see it like, hey, look, if you want to borrow money, that's the cost of doing business, right? And you're going to have some interest with that in order to send yourself to college. I can live with that. I'll be bummed out if they get rid of the federal direct student loan altogether.
Right.
Because again, just like you, Peg, I just worry about if it's only private lenders or predominantly private lenders that are in the marketplace here, do we truly kind of trust that competition's going to win out and the consumer is going to benefit, or is there going to be six banks winking at each other saying,
Trying to make money, and the federal government's trying to encourage further education. They're at least in the past. So
yeah,
those are two different goals. They truly are. And I agree with you. The subsidized, what the hope is, and we know at some colleges you get rid of that subsidized loan, the wealthier colleges will just roll in with institutional grants, and so that won't hurt that family. A lot of schools can't afford to do that. So again, the whole thing about how colleges do this will be even more important, because some schools, it probably won't hurt your package. Other schools, it might if that subsidized loan is gone.
and we're going to come back to that.
Work study too. We haven't even talked about that. That's another federal program where they pay half the student's wage.
Yeah, yeah. And then we're going to come back to that point in terms of how colleges package students when we talk about the Pell Grant next. But another just point I want to make on the plus loan that is interesting is that I think most folks that are familiar with this kind of college ecosystem and how insane college costs have gotten now, right? We're officially at $100,000 a year, right? Like, and even in all colleges, wildly outpacing inflation. You could make an argument, and I think a lot of folks that know what they're talking about here would agree with you, that says the plus loan is the number one culprit in our insane, rising college costs. And the reason being is that this loan is just so easy to qualify for. You don't have to be employed. You don't have to have good credit. The federal government's going to give that college $100,000 check times 4 years. So colleges know that even if families can't afford to come to their school, their federal government's going to write a blank check, right? So it gives them so much permission,
It does, but the family needs to use their head. That's the mixing piece in a lot of the conversations around all of this. Family needs to use their head and own that. You got to own your decisions. And you're right. Like, it allows the college to just say, there's a shortfall. It's a parent. I call it Parent Plus still, because it is truly only a parent is on there. The kid is not on there in any capacity. So yeah, it's, my talk track. I've got examples where it truly is predatory lending. You would think that the government agencies that track that stuff would go after private entities that were doing it. And we're doing it as the government.
Right. I look at it, and it's pretty insane that 45% of the federal government's assets are in parent and student loans, or 35%, but it's still their biggest asset class of everything the federal government owns.
So how does that work? Is anybody looking at the books in the back end? Like, how does this all play out? And we're going to have more tax cuts. Like,
And Peggy, let me tell you too, though, I have a lot of, let me put it this way. I would not have enough discipline, I don't think, if I knew I was, let's put it this way. When I was going to shop for our first home, right? When Rosie and I were looking at our first home, we go to the bank and the bank tells you, here's the maximum amount. You got to find a house that's under $400,000, right? And so good luck out there, but that's the deal, right? According to, your income and your assets and your debt to asset ratio and all that, right? If the bank said to me, just go find the house that you love the best, right?
and we'll make it work.
And we'll make it work. I'd be like, dude, let's go.
I know. I would not. I would have my little spreadsheet that I had when I bought my house. I was shocked at how much the bank, I'm like, there's no way in hell I can afford to spend that much. When we lived in Houston, I'm like, I'm not spending 300. I'm only spending 175,000. Literally, that's what our first house cost. But I'm like weird, right? I have my little P&I projections in my budget. I'm a weirdo, right? Most Americans don't function that way.
Right? You just don't. They don't have that discipline. Like you have it, but I think you're an outlier, right? I think I'm more.
I'm a weirdo. I'm a definite outlier. Yeah, I am.
And it's an advantage, right? That you have that discipline, but it's like most of us are gonna just like kind of give in to their own vices, right? And again, I would be betting on myself. I'd be like, God, fuck it, I'll figure it out later, right? And which is what everybody does, right? And so we're really going against most folks' human nature here, but guess what? We friggin' have to.
Yeah.
That's the deal. Okay. I mean, talk about this one. I mean, number one, just explain to us what a Pell Grant is, why we should care about it, and what's going on with it. Why is it showing up in the headlines?
Yeah, so grants in general from colleges or states or the federal government, that's the free money. You don't have to repay, so you want to grab that. So the kind of the main grant, there's a secondary one too, which I'm sure they're not even mentioning it. The Pell Grant is the main for low income families. 30% of kids are taking advantage of the Pell Grant. It's not huge. It's $7,395. So it's not, it's not paying for Columbia at $100,000, but every little bit helps. It's severely underfunded to the tune of 2.7 billion shortfall is what they're facing. The Pell had been going up for families. It hasn't gone up. And even without it going up, it's in danger. Like for the what I read, the 26-27 school year will have a problem. So not this coming fall, but they'll have a problem funding it if Congress doesn't put in more money into that bucket. And so that's a huge concern for me because it's helping the people that need it the most. And the new FAFSA that happened 2 years ago was amazing and did great things for the Pell Grant. And now if we don't keep it funded, all of that is for naught. And this is going to hit the people that really need the most help. And I'm not, I try and be optimistic on this one. We'll see. We'll see what they do with it. If the current Congress is going to step in and fund that, I hope, but it's in serious trouble from a funding standpoint. And this is all coming out right now.
Yeah, I mean, it's almost like this one again is like, what? It's almost like these changes that are happening or maybe happening are getting less press, but I'm almost like more concerned about. It's almost like, all right, what's going on here? Are we playing smoke and mirrors with the headlines? Because this is what, people should be concerned about. And to your point, these are the folks that need the most help, right? These are the people that need our help as a country to try to make education accessible for everybody. That's who Pell Grants were designed for. Now, here's the thing. My wannabe boyfriend, Peggy, right? Prof G, Scott Galloway,
right?
Yes. My Be Still My Heart. But, he's a professor at NYU. He talks a lot about what we care about, right? And I think we're all aligned philosophically. But even somebody that again, I think is thought of as kind of like a guru in this, making college affordable and accessible for everybody, he doesn't get it, right? Because he talks all the time about the fact that his single mother, who was a secretary, sent him and his sister to college, specifically him, UCLA, right, in the UCs as California residents, and they didn't pay anything, and it all happened via Pell Grants and the small loans that he took, right? It doesn't work that way anymore, right? So the Pell Grants have not caught up with inflation now. So if he was born, today and his mother was a secretary, yes, he would get some financial aid in the Pell Grant, but I was kind of doing some math, with average salaries and all that. But his mom would still be expected to come up with like 20 grand a year for him and his sister to send them to the UCs. Right. And
Yep.
obviously I'm working into
In-state tuition, because the UCs are way more expensive. I mean, the fact that I think about when my dad paid for me to go to college, what my school costs in relation to what he was grossing per year, completely different relationship to what it is now. It's just, it's way out of whack. So yeah, that would have changed his whole life. And that's an example of somebody who's gone on through, I'm sure, I don't know everything about his life, but I'm
Oh,
sure
I
he's
do.
got his, and he's gotten to where he's gotten, but he got that foundation. And that's exactly why the Pell exists. And it does. It breaks my heart that people aren't sitting back and looking at what does this really mean for people, for the people that maybe elected me, probably some people that elected me. Like, how am I affecting them? And that's where, when you're making these changes, I get it. You don't want analysis paralysis, but as you said at the beginning, there should be some thoughtful, like, what are the issues? Where is there waste? How do we deal with this in a systematic? It can be efficient and quick. It doesn't have to be years. But the Pell being, I'm not surprised, just because they haven't kicked it up for several years. And it's just like, I'm a big data. What's the data? What am I emotionally seeing happen? And it's not been a priority to get this done for several years before the new administration even. And now I think it's probably going to be less. And, surprise, surprise, it's underfunded.
Yeah. Well, and look, now obviously your dad sent you to college pre-World War One, but I kid, Peggy, I kid. But but here's the thing today that makes it so, I think, another challenge for families navigating this system, right? Especially those that have no resources and they're eligible for what we call full Pell, right? They have the lowest student aid index you can have as
Zero
a technical
ability.
term,
Yeah.
right? What are the most affordable colleges for those families? It's not even their state schools. It's schools that meet 100% of need, which we picked on Columbia earlier. We said they cost $100,000, which they do, but guess what? They meet 100% of need. So it's so counterintuitive. And how are you supposed to know, right? It's not necessarily, in my experience, common knowledge that, wow, I shouldn't be thinking about state schools necessarily if I have very, little income, little resources. I should be targeting colleges that meet 100% of need, because even if Pell Grants go away, even if federal direct student loans go away, those are still going to be the most affordable colleges for me and my family. But Peggy, what are all these schools that meet 100% of need have in common or close to it?
Extremely hard to get into. Extremely hard to get into. Not because they're better, because
just, yeah,
there's this persona that they are better, and they're not. They might be great fits for certain kids. They're not great fits for other kids, and they're not your ticket to success, whatever you call success. Being rich, being happy, changing the world, they're absolutely not your ticket. Just like you're talking about this economist Scanlon.
yeah,
Look at
yeah,
what she's
exactly.
doing, and she's
So
a young economist. So, but that what you're talking about, it's so counterintuitive. No, actually, Columbia could be a good, cheap, most affordable versus you live in Kentucky versus UK, because UK isn't going to necessarily swoop in. It just depends on the school and how they do things, right? But
exactly.
yeah,
So
yeah.
and that's where, again, you have to get yourself educated. Where are you on this financial aid spectrum? What schools are going to be most generous for you guys? Because the answer is different for every family that we get in front
And
of.
it's different. I have twins. It was
That's right.
different for Shannon versus different for Brennan. So not because their finances were different, they're different kids. So
That's right.
it's not even family specific necessarily. It's college specific with that student, which is a lot. It's a lot to figure out.
Great point. Okay, so all right, Peggy, I know you have to go run. You got to get on the front lines and help make college affordable for a specific
I
family.
do.
And we do not want to stay in your way there, but just kind of in closing here, just kind of like bring us home. Like, we just do a lot of different things at people with all these different initiatives happening, but what are the takeaways here? What are the action items?
So basically, remember what I said at the beginning. Don't catastrophize. Even if you're starting to do it, think, what did Peg and Matt say? I'm going to take a deep breath. I'm going to take a deep breath. I'm going to keep my blood pressure down. We're going to get through this. Just keep that mindset. But the key things, and we've said this before, and we are going to keep saying it so that you will dream this. You need to know your student aid indexes. And there's two. That's why I'm saying plural. You need to know your budget. And I know that's a cringe word, but what? Keep watching us. We're going to make it easy. Okay. I'm the budget queen here. I love budgeting. We'll
I
make
like
it
to change
easy.
your name, Budget Queen.
And then last but not least, and I'm stealing this from my buddy here, and he got it from a football coach, control the controllables, right? You can't control most of what comes at you on a daily basis. You can respond to it as opposed to reacting to it. But the things you can control, go ahead and do that in a healthy manner. But all of this stuff we're talking about, we're trying to keep you in the know so you can take a deep breath and say, all right, I feel informed, but a lot of it you can't control. So just realize that, or else you're literally going to drive yourself nuts with everything that's going on right now. So those to me are the big takeaways.
Same thing, right? Again, our philosophies are very much aligned. I love this line that I heard yesterday because I just think it exudes optimism. What could go right, right? What could go right here? There's gonna if
Change
even
your
if you
mindset of how you think about it. Yeah.
yeah you know even if you don't like this administration, some things are gonna go right. If you love them, some things are gonna go wrong, right? It's not gonna be worst case scenario. It's not gonna be best. You said at the top, Peg. Colleges are going to continue discounting. That's going to happen.
Yeah.
And we have to understand where are we kind of in this spectrum and have that inform our decisions as we build our list of colleges, right? And oftentimes what might appear to be the college that is most out of reach financially, guess what? That's going to be the one that's most affordable
I know.
for so many families, especially these 30% of Americans that are eligible for Pell Grants.
Yeah, and if that's blowing your mind, that statement Matt just said, just stick with us. Keep
Yeah.
coming, keep listening, because we will dive deep into that whole concept so that it makes a lot more sense to you.
All right, Peggy, go end the student debt crisis one family at a time here. I'm sure I will see you very shortly, virtually at least.
All right, everybody, have a great one.
See you. Bye, guys.